The CCT, or Crew Compartment Trainer, is one of 3 ground training devices that NASA built to train space shuttle astronauts. The value of the CCT is that without these ground training devices, it would have been impossible to train the astronauts to do their jobs right the first time, every time in space. Thousands and thousands of hours were necessary for astronauts to spend in these trainers, practicing their jobs over and over and over to get them right.
For every hour of spacewalk that they have planned during their mission, they'll probably spend at least 10 hours in the training environment.
The number of crews that sat in there and did their training and learned on it, it was just invaluable to the Space Shuttle program. And so it's neat that you're going to have that piece of history right there for the public to just go see whenever they want.
You've seen a shuttle maybe from the outside, but when you get to kind of climb in and see, first off, you know, how small it is inside the crew compartment, you think, wow, you know, this is like living in a couple of phone booths, you know, and you see all the switches. It's just a wow factor, I think, that is pretty cool.
It's fitting to have this display here because the Air Force role in human spaceflight has been a critical one from the very beginning of the space age, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond up to today. The Air Force-NASA partnership has been a close one throughout these decades, and the Air Force has contributed greatly toward making the space program work.
This is something that we trained a whole lot of astronauts in. We spent a lot of time in the trainer. And not only training, we did a lot of other things in here that made spaceflight possible.
I always say, you know, the second best thing about going to space is coming back and telling people about it, you know, telling the story, sharing the experience with others. And by putting these out there in the public sector, it allows, you know, people to kind of experience a little bit about what we experience.
It's taken just an amazing amount of teamwork from engineering teams both here at Aircraft Operations Division and over on Johnson Space Center, and then we've had some outside contractor help from Oceaneering that have all put this together. And I mean, we had, you know, 4 meetings a week for the past 6 months trying to get this all worked out. Just the fact that it's so big and, you know, just making sure that it was going to fit into the airplane, you know, we took a lot of time to just ensure that everything was going to go smooth before we got to this point.
It takes a tremendous amount of work to put a new exhibit on display. There's a lot that goes into the planning and the design of the exhibit, and then as you can see here today, all the moving that gets done to prepare for something new. The actual arrival of the Crew Compartment Trainer is just one little piece of the overall development of the exhibit, and then there's the components that will be built over the next year or so.
The visitor's experience at the CCT will begin with the nose. The visitors will be able to get a look at the CCT and see where and how the astronauts train. They'll also be able to walk through a reproduction payload bay where they'll be able to see where some of that equipment was deployed in space through touch screens and multimedia presentations and exhibit panels. They'll also be able to look at some space artifacts, equipment used in space and equipment used by astronauts to perform their missions. A major focus of the CCT exhibit will be science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM education. Now, to push that forward, we're going to create the first prototype of what we call a STEM learning node, and these are going to be placed throughout the museum eventually. The STEM learning node will be a place where our museum educators can do live, in-person, interactive multimedia teaching presentations for groups. And when they're not doing that, the STEM learning nodes will feature looping multimedia presentations that will focus on STEM topics.
And we need people to build these things too, you know. I mean, I go out and they see me, I was an engineer, am an engineer, became an astronaut, and I try to inspire them to you know, study science, study engineering, study math. You know, those are the fields that we really need. And not only to become astronauts, but to become engineers at NASA, to become, you know, rocket builders, and to help us, you know, take that next step.
The CCT will be displayed temporarily in the museum's Cold War gallery. And then eventually, when our 4th building is completed, it will become a major component of our new space gallery.
We also will have enough room for the other components of a space shuttle mock-up, which are going to be built over the next year or so. And that would include the payload bay, the tail, ramps in the shape of wings, and the STEM learning node.
It's a wonderful simulator. All of the astronauts have trained in CCT-1 that flew the space shuttle, I think with the exception of the last 3 shuttle missions. It's a high-fidelity simulator, and the configuration of it makes it a very interesting piece for something like the National Museum of the Air Force.